Hello, this is Curt Pringle, and this is another edition of our Talking Issues series. When I established the kind of Talking Issue podcasts, it was really because I wanted to spend a little more time having in-depth conversations about public policy issues in California. Many people see what happens through government operations in the private sector, but you may not know the backstory. And I think one of those things through my political life and legislative life that I always thought was very difficult to understand was water, the basics of water. I mean, water gets to our house, we turn on our faucet, it's there, there's a certain price we pay. Usually it's pretty inexpensive. But how does all that work? And candidly, I didn't focus that much when I was in the legislature on it, because there are a lot of people in the Central Valley or Northern California even that really made that one of their key focal points. But later in my political life, I realized that was one of those important things, one of the basics that really government touches all the way along the path. And I thought today we should have a focus on water delivery into Orange County for all of us. We're very lucky in Orange County in Southern California to be able to have water districts that provide that. And it really comes through an interesting structure of government. I mean, we all realize that state government has roles and federal government, but as it comes to water, it becomes more and more concentrated down into local communities. Some cities deliver water to your tap, but in Orange County, at least, and in Southern California, Riverside County, and otherwise, there are water districts that are independent of any other government entity. And today, we're fortunate to have one of those leading water districts from Orange County, the general manager, CEO of the Moulton Niguel Water District, Joone Lopez. So, hello, Joone.
Hi, Curt.
Glad you're here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Good. So did I set that up right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, good. Yeah. And you're the third largest independent water district in Orange County, right, in terms of volume or dollars that move through your operation?
That sounds about right.
Is that acceptable? You're not going to let me. And part of that is the different water districts are retail, but different water districts start at the other end. There's wholesale water districts that oftentimes have a transfer mechanism that pay for that transferring of water from wherever that comes from, be it underground or from Northern California. And then it goes through different wholesale processes to a retail water district. There used to be even pipeline management districts that only ran the pipelines. I think in San Clemente was the last one in Orange County that was just a pipeline management district. Then it comes to a water district, or in some cases a city, to deliver it right to the end user as retail. I mean, and you're primarily a retail water agency, correct?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So tell me what Moulton Niguel is from your perspective. What do you see that responsibility and how that responsibility change in water delivery has occurred in the last couple decades?
Sure. Moulton Niguel Water District, as you said, is a retail water agency. We serve 6 cities in South Orange County to a population about 175,000 people. We provide water, wastewater, and recycled water service. So we function as a special district like a city. As a city has a city council, I have a board of directors. I have 7 of them that are elected by the public. And then I am hired by them to run the daily operation and carry out their directives for the organization. We have 270 employees, and we have a variety of function, anywhere from finance, field operations, to water quality, water distribution, accounting, legal department, human resources. So everything is contained within our organization to be able to serve our customers. So our job is to make sure that we have safe, reliable water all the time to our customers. It's interesting in Orange County because everywhere it's a little different. Every region.
Well, even in Orange County, there's multiple areas that get water different ways.
It is.
Yeah, where do you get your water? I mean, where does water that's going to Laguna Niguel, one of your cities that you serve, where does that water come from?
It comes from Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and we import the water through them from Colorado River and the Delta through the State Water Project and through the Colorado River Aqueduct. And so these are all supplies outside of Orange County. And Metropolitan Water District serves 19 million people
Yeah,
in
great.
Southern California, 6 counties. And in Orange County, it's unique because north part of the county is distinctly different than south part of the county. We both get imported water, but in northern part of the county, there's a really rich groundwater basin.
Right.
So you get a combination. And the groundwater is cheaper than the imported water.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Garden Grove, I did pay a little bit of attention on where the water came from into Garden Grove or Anaheim, and it really is. I mean, I think people forget the fact that the Santa Ana River was such a wide and vast river that would flood often, and because of that, over hundreds, if not more years, the water percolated into the groundwater basin from that one river from the mountains up here. But today, that water can only be used for those communities that overlay that Santa Ana River water basin.
That's right. And we have an emergency interconnection arrangement so that in dire situation that we can get some of that water when we have no access to water. Because while Metropolitan is the importer, we also go through our wholesaler, Municipal Water District of Orange County, and they serve all of Orange County. And the groundwater basin is managed by the Orange County Water District. So we have a relationship with both of them, and it works regionally. You mentioned earlier about the size and if that matters. Having worked in different parts of the state, it's really unique to each community and geographic region, not so much about the size. I was also surprised to hear you saying you're very modest about you not really being into the water early on because you have been a key figure in water policy.
Well, only because water people dislike me for so long.
Oh,
No, and you might be even referencing back to some of the time during the Orange County bankruptcy in the 1994, 95, 96 period that I had it out with a lot of water districts only because I thought there were too many. At that time, there were 36 separate water districts in Orange County, more water districts than cities in Orange County. And, part of that is because the way water is delivered and the user of water changed. So some of those earlier districts that had continued on were serving agricultural uses when there were no more agricultural uses really in those areas. So yeah, that's I probably got a little more involved in water back in 95 and 96 because of the Orange County bankruptcy.
Well, and I think sometimes it's good to ask questions. It's good to reevaluate and revisit.
Well, and kind of rolling back with you didn't start being in the water business as the CEO of one of the largest water districts in the county. You started in other water areas of the state. So why don't you give a little of your background so people are looking and saying, where did Joone Lopez come from? And I mean, I think it's a very fascinating bio.
I'm a bit of an odd duck. I started in water in early 2003 as just a very low-level staff working at a wholesale agency serving Southeast LA County and South Bay area. And over time, I always say if you do all the work that nobody wants to do and you always volunteer for everything, people want you around. And I was fortunate to get promoted fairly quickly. And 7 years later, I became a CEO. Interestingly enough, it was in Northern California, a very rural community, predominantly ag. And so I learned a lot about their issues. You can read, you can hear about it, but to really live and work in that environment really taught me a lot about their experiences, which has been very helpful dealing with policies and a lot of the challenges that we deal here in Southern California. And I've had the privilege of working in both public, private water sector, understanding some of the dynamics between those two sectors. Also working with diverse communities gave me a lot of background and a lot of good stories that I could share when we formulate decisions. And I came to Orange County 13 and a half years ago. At the time, I was in Northern California, and I was recruited to come down here, and I just hoped and prayed that I would get this job. I love my Northern California community, but my family's down here, and it's been wonderful to serve the diverse community of Orange County.
Yeah, so maybe you could share that. I guess we could roll back to the 1970s. You might not remember that, but I certainly do. And the movie Chinatown or others that really talked about this this north-south battle or the elements of corrupt influences within the water world of California. But, a lot of people see this a very interesting challenge between Northern California, where most of the water in California comes from the north or the mountains and the runoff and such, and then how that can be used by the people who predominantly the majority of people in California live in the southern part of the state. So most of the water we drink in the southern part of the state is from the northern part of the state, not necessarily from Colorado River or underground. So put in context that battle between the north-south water wars that have always been persistent in the state and continue today, right, with the potential building of a conveyance that brings more water from north to south.
Well, early on in my career, I advocated very heavily for urban communities, not having lived or worked in the Northern California communities. That's why that experience was so powerful for me. And it changed me both personally and professionally in how I look at the world and how I look at water. Prior to getting into water, as I said, I'm a bit of an odd duck because I used to be a police officer. So I'm used to a very contentious environment, and it's been a good training ground for what I was about to experience in water. And one of the things that I see is so much of the tension between North and South is based on really old baggage and lack of understanding. Because I loved my time there. I learned about the culture there, about ranching, about farming. And they're some of the most sophisticated operating business mindset and the nicest people you'll ever meet. And so when we talk about the scarcity of water, there's a lot of water up there compared to where the need is. But there are a lot of institutional barriers or a lot of outdated laws and how we do things. It really requires an overhaul, but that can't happen until we strike some new relationship and trust, because it's not lack of technical solution. It's really the trust and the relationship. And that's some of the things that I've seen. And over time, I do think that we need to change the players around the table to talk about these issues and forging different kind of relationships and understanding so that we can manage really comprehensively water in California. Because interestingly enough, there is enough water in California. It's just getting it to where it's needed, and there's ways to do that.
Yeah, and you talk about the different interest groups. I mean, historically, we've seen the environmentalist community concerned about habitat and species that may be impacted if more water is diverted from north to south. You have the ranchers and the farmers that are very concerned about the cost of water, particularly in terms of growing crops in the Central Valley, and then the urban interests in the south. I mean, to me, that doesn't seem to be that many interests that you couldn't figure something out over the years, particularly as the South draw on water has been reducing as a per capita distribution, right? We might be leveling off population, but actually that population is using water in a more conserving manner, right? I mean, have we seen a reduction, dramatic, in how much people use water in the urban communities?
Absolutely. If you look at the growth, the population growth, even dating back to the 90s, and you see the population grow, but the water usage has either stayed the level or actually has gone down. So there's been a lot of investment and a lot of great work in terms of water conservation and water efficiency. One of the things that I learned, having worked in different parts of California and the very different communities, is that water is religion. When it comes to water, everyone is right. And while there may be few interests, the interests are very strong. It's very emotional.
Right.
And everyone is right. In my career, it's really not about convincing people that I have a better idea or I'm right. I always try to find a common ground, because you're not going to get everything you want. I'm not going to get everything I want. So let's get something, because something is better than nothing. This notion of compromise is a really key factor in being able to maneuver through the egos, the baggage, the religious mindset that we have when it comes to water, and really trying to find a statewide solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is one state, right? Where it's not like we're battling across country lines. We're battling interstate lines.
And we know someone that lives in all these areas,
Right.
and you never know where you might end up.
Right. So let's talk about the water that shows up on your customer's tap. It primarily starts Northern California or the Colorado River, which are the two importing locations, and then it goes through a wholesale. MWD is the largest water district in the world, if not or close. So they're the ones responsible for bringing that water into Southern California.
Yes. And then from there, they have 26 member agencies. So some are cities, some are districts like Municipal Water District of Orange County. So then that water is essentially sold to the member agencies. And the member agencies, some are wholesalers like MODOC, some are both wholesalers and retailers, some are just retailers. But in Orange County, it comes through Municipal Water District, Orange County. That water is conveyed to Deemer Plant in Yorba Linda, where again, it goes through a series of treatment, and then it comes into our distribution system where we send it to homes and businesses in our service area. So Metropolitan, they actually do the treatment of the water, and retails like us have a way of monitoring to make sure that when it hits our distribution line, that the water quality is where it needs to be, and when it's not, we make adjustments, but it's predominantly done through Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Now, when it comes to recycled water, for example, in Moulton Niguel, we do that because in the 60s, we were one of the first ones to do water recycling, really born out of need because we're 100% reliant on imported water. Back in the 60s, we started providing recycled water service to golf courses. And today, in our service area, 25% of our overall demand is met with recycled water, which is a really great way to be reliable and resilient. But the rest of it is imported water.
So water is imported in. So who increases the price along the way? I mean, does MWD have a ownership right in Colorado River and Northern California water that they bring here?
So they are the contractor for the Northern California water, and you've heard a lot of discussions, both in terms of the delta itself,
Right.
the conveyance project, but also the fragility of the conveyance that has been in existence for decades.
Right.
When it comes to Colorado, they are our negotiator for Southern California with the 7 states, which is happening right now, and we're all sort of on the edge of our seats to see where that's going to land because we do need to come up with solutions.
So they buy the water or the rights of the water, and then they build the system. The system's owned by them to transfer water here from Colorado River or Northern California.
So they were part of the construction of the Colorado River, the state water project coming from Northern California. There's a variety of contractors because that was built with the state funds.
I see.
So there's...
But the biggest
plays a key role.
investor
That's right.
was the state or Metropolitan?
I would say it's both, depending on which infrastructure they're looking at.
Right.
But Metropolitan has been the lead when it comes to water in Southern California. Northern California is quite different because they have their own sources of supply. So clearly they're not associated with Colorado State Water Project. But when it comes to policy, we're all commingled.
Right.
But for example, in Calaveras County, where I worked, we had 3 sources of supplies, 3 rivers, McCollum, Calaveras, Stanislaus. We actually had more water than we knew what to do with. And so at that time, we were thinking about wheeling the water, transferring the water to other areas that needed, and looking at different ways of conveyance to actually make some economic benefits for the region.
Meaning if they had excess water in the north, they could use the canals that move water south. And wheeling it means you just put that water in there and use an existing conveyance, and you just pay a toll to use that conveyance, right?
And it doesn't have to be an actual molecule of water. It's called paper exchange. So you take more and I take less, but it's really on paper.
I see.
And a lot of those deals are made.
So there's that water. And so if someone's looking at that, obviously to move that water into Southern California is a costly endeavor, and one requiring retrofitting and continuing maintenance and for that operating system to work. So we as water users in the South are paying that. You then have the treatment is being treated, then the wholesaler that kind of moves the water around Southern California, in this case, the Municipal Water District of Orange County, they obviously have to charge something to do that. And what do they add to that equation?
The role of agencies such as MODOC, this goes back in the days when, one metropolitan was formed.
Yes.
And cities like Pasadena, you have some of the early ones to Anaheim, that's right. And so with MODOC, their job is to make sure that they convey the water to us, and also to facilitate regional planning and provide support to its agencies. You mentioned earlier about sort of the cost of water, how that gets set, who decides on that. For a retail agency, we set the rates for our customers. But what drives those rates is driven by the purchase water price, which is Metropolitan Water District. And that is by and large the single largest, along with our infrastructure investments. So all these capital infrastructure needs that we have, old pipes, old facilities, these are the things that we have to rehabilitate.
Right.
Also build some new ones to make sure that we have safe, reliable, but also to be in compliance with a lot of these state regulations and requirements. So those two are the biggest drivers of our cost.
So when do you take responsibility for the water? Who takes it from the Deemer water plant in Yorba Linda to entering your district? Do you provide all the pipeline system to get it there, or is that paid for by another entity?
In Orange County, it's a bit complex because you have many agencies. So we have these transmission lines where you have multiple partners who are part of that transmission line. Of course, Metropolitan is very much part of it. And we all have levels of joint relationship along those infrastructure that bring the water into our service area. Once it hits those interconnection points in our service area, then it is completely ours.
So to maintain that's a cost you obviously have to pass on to your customers, not the whole network's customers.
Absolutely.
And then when you talk about some of the added services that your district has moved forward with, be it recycling water or wastewater treatment, things like that, those are also costs that are pretty much borne exclusively by your residents, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing that we've seen with some of these wildfires, most recently the Los Angeles wildfire, is we really have to make those investments. And we had a wildfire in our service area back in 2023. And luckily, because of the relationships that we have with public safety, we're able to take everything and get it in control. But it was a really eye-opening lesson about investment into these projects and infrastructures that will help. So one of the things that we did was we partnered with City of Aliso Viejo, Orange County Fire Authority, Aliso Viejo Community Association, and we built a helicopter hydrant in our service area. And I think it was a year ago when Laguna Beach had their wildfire. Literally months after we commissioned it, we had to deploy it. And I think it was about 36 drops that really helped to contain the water. And those are the kinds of investments that we also make outside of making sure that water goes into your home and business and all the wastewater gets out of your home. Because sometimes that's a part that people forget about, wastewater, because you kind of flush it and you forget about it.
Yeah.
But imagine if you couldn't flush it away. That's a public health issue. And actually, that's the part that keeps me awake at night more than anything else because of you got the contamination issue, penalty, compliance. So when we have a water line break, we know that that's going to get contained and we have disruptions. But when you have a sewer line break, it has all kinds of ramifications. And that's an important, essential part of being a water agency like us, that we don't forget the wastewater side of it.
Yeah. No, and not every district has a wastewater component. Your district does, right? So you see that element. So on the recycled water discussion, you treat water so that it can be used again in very specific ways, though. I mean, there's a whole bunch of discussion along the years, and some at the Orange County Water District right now is one of the largest reclaiming agencies of water in the country. But what differs between their system and yours?
So the groundwater replenishment system that you alluded to, that Orange County Water District built, it's just historic, right? The first and the largest of its kind in the world. They treat wastewater to such high level, partnership, the Orange County Sanitation District, that they can treat to such high level and they inject it back into a groundwater basin, pump it out for drinking water. And that really set the standard. And in our agency, historically, we have recycled water for non-drinking uses, so irrigation, golf courses, public right-of-way. And that's been a huge help to reliability, especially in times of drought. But one of the things that we're looking at right now and exploring is what's called direct potable reuse. And that is really working and building off the great work that Orange County Water District has done, but also a lot of other agencies across the country and the world for that matter, and seeing how we can treat that water and put it right into the drinking water system without going through what's called indirect going into the ground. So it's basically pipe to pipe technology, and the science and the regulations are there. And now we're exploring to see how that could be a help to our service area, but also in South Orange County, working very closely with the pioneers like Orange County Water District, Orange County Sanitation District, and Municipal Water District of Orange County to see how we could realize some of these regional benefits.
Mm-hmm. So at this moment in time, Orange County receives no water from, desalinization programs, right?
No, not at this time.
Yeah. But is that going to happen?
I do think that desalination is part of our water future in California. Clearly in San Diego, you have the largest
Right.
Carlsbad. And so we've seen what that's doing for city of San Diego. And I think it's a matter of where you site it, where you need it, and everyone's exploring. And I think it's good to look at that because we need to plan better. We need to plan, I would say, more boldly and faster so that we can make sure that our communities continue to have the water that they've known to expect.
Is it a matter of price?
It is a matter of price. It's also a matter of environmental impact. There is a cost associated with anything that is new,
Right.
and it's a tolerance of how much cost are our customers willing to bear. But it's also the risk, because there are some projects that have been attempted for over a decade, and they didn't come to fruition. And in the meantime, you're spending a lot of money in these projects.
Right.
So what are my risks? Cost and risk is a key thing that I look at whenever I evaluate any project that is being proposed. But also, depending on the type of project, you also have to think about the opposition, whether it's environmental opposition, it could be other things. And that's part of your risk assessment to see, is this project likely going to happen? Because even before a drop can be realized, there are millions of dollars that need to be spent. And is that the right investment?
And, it's interesting. I mean, I was around in Orange County when the Orange County Water District, again, the largest reclaimer of drinking water from in the world, if not certainly the country. But that discussion was the price was about 4 times what imported water would cost. So that was compared back to back, and yet the price of water keeps going up pretty significantly, and therefore it caught up with that price of importing water from the Metropolitan Water District. So now that reclaimed water is not overwhelmingly expensive compared to other water. So I guess that's the same thought a lot of people are using with desal, even though that sticker shock in San Diego County, at least, is something of significance to some people.
Exactly. What's the price of water when you don't have water? That kind of becomes the reality check,
Right.
what you're willing to pay. Over the years, just as a fun fact, in the state of California, there's about 7,000 different water systems.
Yeah.
Think about that fragmentation. And it's all different sizes and types. And over the years, the rate increased to keep up with the inflation and just the cost of everything in life going up. It really hasn't kept up by and large. And many agencies are trying to play catch up, especially when you have infrastructures that are getting old that require attention. And it seems like a rate shock to some people, but when you look at the cost of water, it's still very manageable compared to some of the other things. But it's it requires a lot of conversation. I don't like to say education necessarily because a lot of people don't want to be educated and they want to be taught to and they want to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do with our customers is listening to them and making sure that our rates are understood and modifying it as we go depending on the needs of our customers.
So what flexibility do you have with rates? I mean, rates can run the gamut, right? There's people in your district that have huge pieces of property and landscaping and all the beautiful lands around some of those homes versus people in your service area that are much lower income. And so talk about how government in California is allowed to establish rates for various people in various living conditions.
So I'll start with the state and then kind of drill down into our service area. Again, a lot of these areas are unique, but Prop 218 really is the law when it comes to setting rates. Now, private water is different. 80% of water in California is delivered through a public type of water agency, whether it's city, special district, mutuals, 20% investor-owned utilities. They are governed by the California Public Utilities Commission, and they go through a completely different process. And I've worked for an IOU, and it's like going through a legal process through the PUC. But buying...
Just like electricity from Edison. There are private companies. Edison's private. Some people don't think so, but it's private. And there's private water companies that their rates are scrutinized through the state PUC.
Right. And for agencies like us, it's Prop 218. And Prop 218 basically says you can only charge for the cost of service, cost of water. So you have to do this very in-depth cost of service study that really looks at your sources of water, who's using it, what are the cost drivers. You have to show the math. You can't just say, I think this is what you need to pay. You really have to drill down and do very rigorous mathematics to make a case of why you charge what you charge and over the course. And you have to show a lot of long-term planning. It's pretty intense.
Right.
And in the handful of years, there's been a lot of court challenges around some of these rate structures. So more and more, it's getting very restrictive in terms of being able to set rates.
In that regard, in terms of someone wanting to, if you own 10 acres that around your house, you should pay more because you're getting different types of enjoyment from the land than if you had all of that built-in housing. So the water usage is determined by the amount of water coming there and the cost to get that water there. And there have been conflicts between surcharges to people with larger properties, for example, right?
Yes. And in our service area, we have what's called budget-based rate structure, which allows for greater flexibility. Now, it's not for everyone, but it certainly does work well for us and many of the other agencies in the state because the way that we charge, it's tiered based on efficient use. So if you use your water efficiently, we base that on how many people per household, how many irrigable space you have if you have outdoors. And we calculate that based on evapotranspiration. I'm not going to get into all the technical stuff,
Sure.
But we give you essentially an efficient budget. And if you stay within that budget, you pay the lowest tier. If you decide to use more, then you pay the inefficient higher tiers. And the differential from the higher tiers, we invest that right back into our community and customers on rebate programs, helping high schools with some of the retrofits. So we invest all of that right back in because as a public agency, we cannot and we do not make a profit. Everything is transparent. Everyone sees the books. But our rate structure allows us to have the lowest average bill in South Orange County. So it works for us, and our customers like it because it puts the choice in their hands. You get a customized budget based on the needs that you say you have, and then you get to choose. I could be efficient or not. And you're not going to cite me. You're not going to give me a penalty. You're not going to yell at me. I can manage my property the way that I want, and I will pay what I feel is worth my values. And that has been really something that our customers have embraced and allowed us to weather through a lot of these droughts and not have the rebounds that you see in a lot of areas because our customers get it. And our theme is resilient together because as a utility, we can't do this by ourselves. Without the customers participating, without people in the community, political leaders helping us and supporting us, we're not going to be successful.
Yeah,
Our story is a testament.
I've seen that. I mean, it's very interesting perspective because during drought times, people become a little more sensitive to jump through the hoops that have a restrictive use. And then at the same time, getting charged more for the limited amount of water that they're using. And I think there's a lot of cynicism with water districts, with the customer that says, okay, you want me to cut back, I'll cut back, or you're forcing me to cut back and therefore I cut back. But at the same time, now you're raising a rate that somehow never seems to go back to a pre-drought level. So I mean, do you think you're avoiding some of that, friction with your customers by establishing the rates the way you do, and not necessarily having great fluctuation during drought times?
Yes, but it's also the relationship, building those relationships very early on, being out there in our community, investing in our community, showing up, building that trust is the most critical thing, and what kind of rate structure or policy that you have. That human interaction, that kind of connection is so important. And when you have that and you can have a conversation around why things change, and you have a group that understands. Our last two rate cycles, which has been 4 years each, we got 0 protests. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
Never happened in the history of our district, because we put the work in way before, and we continue to put that work in throughout to make sure that our customers understand why we're doing it. And also, the cost of water is not just driven by scarcity, right? We need energy to pump water. We have to rely on chemicals, the supply chain, the cost of material, all of these things that impact cost. We bear those, and we have to pass it on to someone, because if we don't and infrastructure fails, then what happens?
Right.
Why didn't you guys fix it? Why didn't you guys tell us?
So you mentioned something, and I think it's currently a hot spot, even though, let me think, I was recently married in 1984, and it was soon after that. I know my wife and I went to a Garden Grove City Council meeting when they were talking about putting fluoride in the water. And today those topics are still being talked about and questioned and thought through, and certainly there's advocates on both sides. So what do you put in the water?
Again, we don't treat the water that comes from Metropolitan.
So any decision on something like fluoride or other elements is made, by this huge board in the Metropolitan Water District, or the Municipal Water District, which is the wholesaler, or can individual cities and water districts make that decision?
It's Metropolitan,
Okay.
because we get the water from them. But keep in mind that there's a lot of things that people could contest.
Correct.
But we have the most restrictive water quality requirements in the state of California. A lot of people don't realize that when it comes to bottled water and tap water, although you might like the taste of bottled water, that tap water is much more heavily regulated than bottled water, because bottled water is FDA, but tap water goes through state and regulatory federal requirements. It's very rigorous, and we have to do what's called Consumer Confidence Report, where we show all the levels of every single constituents. I mean, as science is getting better, any tiny traces. So all these things are done with great science behind them, and a lot of times people will contest for different reasons. But again, we follow the standards that really does come from Metropolitan, but they don't do that in just silos. They do talk to all the agencies. They do go through a very extensive reviews to make sure that the right standards are set. And when those standards need to change for a variety of reasons, then we do that as well.
Mm-hmm. So one of the, not adding, but taking out of water certain chemicals or certain elements, the new focus on PFAS and whatever lifetime,
Forever
contaminants, or whatever they are, bits of plastic or whatever makes up the PFAS. How is that treated by Metropolitan Southern California?
Right now, because the Metropolitan supply, it's imported. And what we're seeing, PFAS, is really more in the groundwater supply. Orange County Water District has been a national leader in leading that effort, both at California and DC. And a lot of the cities have been affected in Northern California, as you're very familiar, Northern County, as you're familiar with.
Right.
In South County, because we don't have groundwater supply, we don't have that, but we pay attention because it's a big issue.
Right.
Just boomed. in the last several years. And again, there's a lot of regulations. And one of the things about regulation is it comes at a cost. Everything comes at a cost. So when you hear about these regulations, you also may hear like unfunded mandates. And those are a lot of challenges. And all these costs has to be paid by someone, and that is the public.
Yeah, and technology changes and moves on. And I know one of the things that I'm very impressed with your district, and you particularly, is the focus on new technologies and new ways to deliver service, but also all of the data that is out there in the world today and the analytics that you can get your hands on. And you're the founder of the California Data Collaborative, I believe, and that to maybe tell a little bit about using all the big data that is available today to make long-term water decisions or rate decisions or planning decisions on how you craft and repair delivery systems.
And think about how the world has changed. Think about Netflix. Think about Amazon. They anticipate, even Instagram. There's so many analytics. The volume, the variety, and the speed of data it's unreal.
So allow people to understand what you're talking about. What is this data? In what areas?
So it's big data. Data is not stuff that's on Excel spreadsheet, Access database, or on your clipboard. Those are, yes, technically data, but they're messy and disorganized. When we talk about big data, that means data that have been coded, standardized, and centralized into a repository where you can actually get some really meaningful information. So in the water industry, we've suffered from lack of data. And this really came to light 2015 during one of the first historic droughts. And Governor Brown was issuing executive order. The State Water Resource Control Board was giving mandates that they'd never done before, haircuts across by percentages. And at the time, when water agencies like us spoke to the decision makers and the regulators, they said, we just don't have really good data.
So everybody's treated the same.
Yes.
Water districts were all the same. We're going to give a 25% reduction on your usage.
Right.
So live with it.
And we knew that wasn't good for communities like Orange County that have been really aggressive when it comes to conservation and efficiency. So at the time, one of my employees' brother was actually going to NYU. And there was this big civic data movement under the Bloomberg administration, and it was having impacts to helping public safety. While I didn't know what big data was at the time, I said, there's some very smart things that are happening with some very smart people. I called 5 other agencies up and down the state, GMs that I knew, and I said, you have smart people, I have smart people. I found some really good smart people. Let's get them together and see what we can do to help us and to help the state make better decisions. And right away, one of the early success was that we were one of 2 agencies in the entire state of California that was exempted from 2 days a week watering mandate, because we were able to show with our data, which had been cleaned and standardized and deposited by staff that I hired. We were the first ones to hire data scientists in the country, I believe. And they coded all these 75 million data sets that were all over the place and made it into big data. And with that, we were able to show what we were doing was, in the state board's opinion, they said it was superior to what they were asking. So that was your first aha moment.
So dumb it down for a guy like me to be able to say 75 million data points. Like, what are some of those data points?
So at this time, we were looking at all the consumption data of our customers, right? And we literally did have that in Excel spreadsheets. We had a lot of that data on paper. We had a lot of that data on a lot of legacy systems. So what my data scientist coder did was took all of that, developed codes. I'm not a technical expert, but essentially took all that and standardized it into a common data set and put it into a central depository and be able to now use tools and bring out data to say, this is how much the trends of water that we have been using under this strategy. And if we overlay what the state was requiring, it actually would be less. So we were able to show that. And that's the beautiful thing about data, is that it helps you tell your story with evidence and specific things without just anecdotal information.
Right.
And so when you look at
or assume that everybody's the same or everyone's system's the same, and that comes from, you were able to look at consumption issues based upon all kinds of factors. You're able to look at how the age of your system and how keeping a system up and fully repaired allows for less seepage and, all of that kind of stuff. Is that what's brought in?
Yes, and when we have this data set, we were now able to partner with others outside of our water. One of my favorite stories when we partner with Netflix for free. And they have these amazing tools that we don't even know exist, that we can't even afford.
Right.
But because we had this clean data set, we were able to partner with them and utilizing their predictive modeling tool that no way we would have been able to do. And again, they did this for us for free. We were able to essentially save $20 million in 6 months. We were going to invest in a project, but instead of doing that, we realized through this model that if we worked with our customer to shave some of the high peaks of recycled water, that we didn't have to build this reservoir. So we were able to then redirect that $20 million into some of our other capital projects that were in need. And that just took 6 months. And that was a fascinating part, that we could partner with people like this. If we just had an Excel spreadsheet and a clipboard, there was no way they wouldn't take it.
And I just don't think the public knows. I hate to say this as a libertarian-leaning conservative person myself, that I mean, privacy, the data that we generate through our living, from our phones to our cars to watching things on TV, all of that data is out there on me, and that you could put it all together as a massive data function for an entire community. You understand how that community operates. And I've seen it in the transportation sector, where they know if you live here, where people who live in that general area are going. And I'm sure you're able to do that same thing in terms of water usage. A certain type of people do certain things.
And you say when you have leak at your home, now that we have advanced meter infrastructure, which is our version of smart meter, coupled with all the data and analytic capability that we have, I can let you know when we think you have a leak based on the consumption and the trends that we see on an hourly basis. Before that, you would not know until you get your bill, which is like a month or even 2 months later. And this is a real big benefit to our customers. And that's why the California Data Collaborative really just exploded, because it came at a time when it was needed. And it's really at a point where it's meeting the future needs, particularly with AI.
Yeah.
Where do you go? How do you do it? How do you incorporate it? Because there's a lot of potential there, but we have to harness it, and we have to look at privacy. And with the Data Collaborative, we have right now 37 members that represent 21 million Californians. And we have non-disclosure agreements, and we have securities in place to make sure that these data are not compromised. But we can look at an agency level data, we can look at aggregate data, and we use this data to talk to the regulators and the legislators about what kind of policies make sense. Conservation as a way of life, this big thing that's coming, and it was years in the making. We were able to course correct some of the ways that this was being designed with actual data. And so the Data Collaborative was a convener in that front, kind of being the bridge between the state and all the agencies.
Yeah, and I think the fear that a lot of people have in this is that they can pinpoint down to me. And maybe the only ones that can pinpoint down to me are the insurance companies, because they will tell me I need one of those automatic turn-off things on my main line if the water flow is different than what it had been historically. It did turn off on Saturday when I was washing off the barbecue. The water turned off because I hadn't been washing off barbecues very much over the last couple months, I guess. But it is pretty interesting how that technology moves, and it's not just on an individual basis. Your data is district-wide or county-wide or maybe street-wide. But the point of the matter is it's not pinpointed down to a single individual. So that fear may not be as great as some people have.
And there are laws that protect individual privacy information. So the big message is there's nothing to fear.
So the government people can't use that phrase, though. Joone, you've been doing so good up there. The government can say there's nothing to fear. Everybody has.
Well, I would say in this space, in terms of just data, because if you don't have data, it's garbage in, garbage out. You don't make good decisions. It's not accurate. And that's why things like stranded capacity, these are real problems that we're experiencing because we just didn't have data. And by the way, it's no one's fault. But if we don't have good data and if you don't understand your demand and what supply is available, you're going to miss the mark. And that comes literally at a cost. And that's what we're seeing. So having data is not just, well, is that nice? It's not a luxury. It's a necessity so that we make the right investment, that we make the right policies and decisions. And it's more transparent, accountable to the public because they want to see that.
Right.
And the expectations of the customers are changing. Right. It's on-demand world that we live in. So they expect you to know as a utility about their usage and what's going on in their household. Rather than saying it's just on you. It's not a one-way relationship.
And if Netflix can tell me what TV show I would like next because they are using data to say we should not use data to make government run more efficiently. And I know you're a leader in that, and you deserve a lot of credit for really stepping up and forming that. But that's one of many things that I know your district, but you personally are involved in. So thanks for sharing so much today. I hope that certainly informed me. I hope it informed others.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Joone, for coming.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation.